I travel a lot, and one of my favorite ways when it comes to traveling is doing a road trip. Being on the road is just an incredible experience. I've been coast to coast, at least at the exact time of this video, in America 9 times. I've gone up and down the West Coast, up and down the East Coast. I did an entire countrywide tour before. I'm constantly on the road, and like anything in life, there's a lot of things I wish I knew before doing a big road trip and before doing a big drive. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you my 10 best driving long distance tips and road trip tips.
Oh, hi, Marc.
Number 1, staying hydrated. This is the one that I did not expect the most out of anything on this list. I still remember when I first started driving, doing a road trip, for some reason, I was just unbelievably dehydrated and just super thirsty the entire trip. I don't know what it is, but if you're doing like a big distance drive or a big road trip, staying hydrated is, I know it may sound like a very basic and odd place to start on this video, but that's the biggest tip I wish someone told me before doing a big road trip. So this is what I typically do. 1, before I do a big drive, I typically have like a big electrolyte beverage. My go-to right now is Body Armor. No affiliation with the company, I'm just a huge fan of them. And then in addition to that Body Armor that I start with, I then also buy an entire gallon of water. So I'll probably have, being honest, an entire Body Armor, 32 ounces of liquid, and it has electrolytes and all that kind of stuff. And then also the gallon of water while I'm driving. Again, I don't know what it is, but there's something about being in your car, sitting there driving for hours upon hours, that's way more dehydrating than you think. Number 2, GPS logistics. So there's a lot to unpack here, but the biggest thing is this: make sure 1, your GPS on your phone, your cellular data is working well. I do suggest if you, let's say, are doing a big road trip somewhere that you know service might be very, very spotty or maybe even non-existent, buying like an OG GPS. I feel like it's crazy that these are almost considered now an obsolete technology to an extent, but they still have their place. If like you're in a very remote area and you're worried about service, not a bad idea to not only have your phone GPS, but also an actual physical GPS. Now, there are a couple pro tips I will say about using your phone when it comes to having the GPS. 1, make sure you get a phone mount. I'm still blown away when I see people driving in general who just have their phone like this and they're doing this like head bob motion. Just buy a phone mount. You can get one on Amazon for like 10 bucks. You can even get one, I think, at the dollar store, right? Just get one. The second thing is this: in case you didn't know, and this is a huge pro tip, what you can do is you can start the route on that GPS. So I personally love Google Maps. That's my main go-to. So let's say I'm using Google Maps. I can start the route. Once I start driving, as long as I don't close out Google Maps by accident, which has happened before, but as long as I just leave it open, it will still work even if you don't have any service whatsoever. This is something not a lot of people know. So let's say I am driving. I'm in a remote area. I have no service around me. I can maybe go to a gas station or somewhere, connect to their Wi-Fi, or try to get some service anywhere, pull up the GPS on Google Maps, hit my destination, hit start, and again, Google Maps can still work. It might not have real-time traffic data and everything, but it will still work without any service as long as that route and that trip has been started. Another pro tip I'll give you on top of that is to avoid tolls. You can very easily do this when it comes to Google Maps, and I do suggest that if you are doing a big distance drive, I'm talking about coast to coast, like say here in America or whatever, there are so many different toll roads and it's very easy to forget which ones you drove on. Sometimes they send you a bill in the mail and you can pay it pretty easily. Other times they expect you to go out of your way and pay it. It's kind of weird how each kind of toll road has different rules and regulations and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of them aren't too expensive. Some of them in New York, for example, can be. A lot of them aren't too bad, but the issue is if you don't pay them, which has happened to me before, if you don't pay them and you forget, the bill or the fine you can get can be kind of pricey and just really annoying. So I do suggest if you're driving a big distance with all these different toll roads around the country and everything, it only adds, it depends on where you are, sometimes not too much extra time on your trip, and all you have to do is on Google Maps, just select to avoid tolls. Number 3, charging. Now, some of these are pretty straightforward and pretty direct. Other ones are a bit more in-depth. For example, this one's pretty straightforward, and that is this. 1, definitely have a phone car charger. I feel like most people have these anyway, but I will say, when you're on a road trip, if you're running Google Maps and let's say Pandora or Spotify or let's say the podcast app, if you're running all this stuff on your phone's gonna die a lot quicker. So I do suggest having some type of phone card charger. I feel like most people have these. The second thing I suggest, and I always have this as a backup, is an actual portable phone charger. I don't know why, but sometimes like say if I'm driving and I'm stopping somewhere, like say I'm doing a big road trip and I'm stopping at a random Walmart parking lot, for example, which we'll talk about a bit later in this video. Having a portable phone charger just to charge your phone overnight can be super helpful. It's the kind of thing that I don't use all the time on a road trip. I mean, sometimes I don't even use it at all, but I have it there just in case, because you can be surprised how much it can come in handy. I know a lot of people, for example, who like start doing a road trip and they're just camping, right? And that's a great way to charge your phone overnight. Number 4, planning stuff. What I'm talking about is kind of planning in advance what you're gonna listen to or what you're gonna do while driving. Of course, things that are safe and responsible. But my typical go-to, I'd say, is one, I love downloading podcasts. That's a big thing right now. You can very easily download them on your phone, which I suggest you do. I will say as a side note, in this day and age, you'd be surprised how good cell phone service can be in a lot of different places, right? I feel like the first time I ever did a big road trip was way back when in 2014. And I'd say, especially when I'd be in a remote area, about half the time I would not have any service. Now, I feel like in this day and age, technology has just gotten a lot better and everything. That service isn't too bad to worry about as much as before, but it's still something you need to be cognizant of. So one, I suggest, like say, planning some podcasts that you want to listen to. 2, planning music, whether you want to, let's say, download music on your phone, however you want to do it. The next one I suggest, number 3, is going to be comedy. This is probably my favorite thing to listen to when driving because I feel like it's engaging enough where sometimes a podcast, I'm not going to lie, if I'm driving and I'm just doing those hours, sometimes a podcast can get a little dull or a little boring, I hate to say it. However, stand-up comedy is awesome and perfect. Like I feel like the typical special for most comedians is about an hour. So if I'm doing an 8-hour road trip, for example, I might do a few stand-up comedy specials, a few podcasts I might download, a bunch of music I'll download. And then in addition, there are 2 more that sometimes I'd like to do. One is an audiobook. This is a great way to kind of kill 2 birds with one stone. Let's say there's a book you want to read, download the audiobook. You can read it, in a sense, or listen to it while driving. The second one, and I know this sounds a bit cheesy, is I'm just gonna call it like educational stuff. I remember one time I downloaded an entire audio course that was meant to teach you like conversational Spanish, and you just listen to it, and you kind of repeat back and forth with the audio. Sometimes when I'm driving, I'm just really in the mood to listen to music and almost zone out. It's kind of oddly like meditative. I know that sounds weird, but anyone who's done like a big distance drive probably knows what I'm talking about. Like being on the road, it's like oddly meditative. So sometimes I might just zone out with silence, right? Other times I might listen to music. Other times I'm really in the mood for a podcast. Other times I really want to listen to an audiobook or stand-up comedy. Or other times I want to, like, say, learn something new, like Spanish, for example, and I want to do more of an educational course. And I suggest all these to, one, give you different ideas of things to do on the road trip, like different activities, if I call it that, especially ones that don't involve your phone. Because the last thing you want to do is be driving, you're bored, you start scrolling on your phone, you're texting people back, not safe whatsoever. So firstly, I want to give you a couple different ideas of like things to plan. But 2, I suggest planning out all this stuff ahead of time. That way you have it, like say, all on your phone, ready to go, or all on another device, ready to go. Number 5, drowsy driving. This is a huge one because in case you didn't know, an accident happens from someone being too tired on the road every 30 seconds. They've even done studies that find that drowsy driving is worse than drunk driving. Of course, I'm not advocating for drunk driving or drowsy driving. I'm not advocating for either, but this is something to be aware of. Like one huge pro tip I have kind of on top of this, I'm more of a night owl. I'm more of a go to bed super late, wake up a bit late compared to the average person. However, when I'm doing a road trip, I will try to wake up way earlier than normal because I find the second the sun goes down, that's where the drowsy driving just really kicks in. There's also something I will say too, that during the nighttime when you're driving, I find that like it's way more just, you're seeing the same thing over and over again, just those lines over and over again. You're just staring like for hours. I feel like during the day, one, the sun's out, so of course it keeps you more alert and awake. But two, you're seeing all this different scenery around you when driving, which just kind of grabs your attention a lot more, keeps you more alert, it's more interesting, right? But this is a big thing I really got to bring up. If you are driving, regardless, like say, if it's sunny out or not, regardless of the situation, if you're tired, if let's say you're hitting that wall, and I think we've all been there, absolutely stop and pull over as soon as possible. They've done so many studies to show that, for example, if let's say you've been awake too long and you're hitting that wall, you're just as impaired as if you're legally drunk. I think the issue I find is that if let's say you've been drinking, a lot of people know, okay, one, I've been drinking, I shouldn't drive. And two, it's a measurable thing, like your BAC. The problem with drowsy driving is I think a lot of the times when you're on that road, you're like, all right, I'm 3 hours away. I've already driven 6 hours. I can do these last 3 hours, right? No big deal. There's been sometimes I'm 45 minutes away from my destination, and I'm like, you know what? I just should not be driving. Especially in different parts of the country, you'd be surprised, or maybe not, that there are numerous signs on the road saying, hey, no drowsy driving. If you're driving too tired, please pull over, go to a rest stop, stop at a Walmart, stop just somewhere. And I know this is not the most positive thing to talk about in this video, because most people probably watching this video, you're getting ready for a road trip, you're getting excited, you can't wait to be on the road, experience new things. But this is something I do gotta mention. I know a bit of a pessimistic note, but I have had friends almost die from drowsy driving accidents, from being too tired, whether they were driving or one of their friends was driving. It's a bigger issue than you think, and I think especially when you're driving long distances and you're putting in those hours, always be aware that, like, if you're too tired and you hit that wall, yes, I know some people have more coffee or an energy drink, or they put on really loud music or whatever. Just pull over, take a nap and sleep, and then continue driving. And speaking of pulling over, let's talk about Walmarts. Absolutely massive pro tip when driving long distances, especially, let's say, if you are doing like a multiple day road trip and you're like, why get a hotel for, 8 hours just overnight and then continue driving? The good thing about Walmarts, in case you didn't know, is for most Walmarts, you can sleep there overnight. You can drive there, park, sleep overnight, like say in your car, in your RV, in your van, whatever you're sleeping in, wake up the next morning, and leave. Now, there are a few pro tips I do have to give when it comes to this. One, I think the biggest thing is what I typically like to do, like say if I'm doing a big distance drive, is I will usually find a Walmart that I'm gonna drive to in advance. So let's say if I'm driving up the West Coast, for example, I usually like to drive, this is what I find is the safest amount of time, 8 hours. I find anything over 8 hours, I start to hit a bit of a wall, and I'd much rather split up the road trip in 8-hour segments than try to drive too much, and I hit a big wall, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm on the road now, and I'm just really, really hitting it. Like I said before, drowsy driving is a huge issue. So what I'll typically do is maybe find a Walmart that's about 8 hours towards my destination away, if I'm driving, like say, multiple days in a row. And then what I'll do, and this is important, is I'll call them. Some Walmarts do not allow you to park overnight. Some do. Some have a bunch of signs all over the parking lot saying you cannot park overnight. There's other Walmarts, for example, though, that might say, hey, you know what, you can park here overnight, but just give us your license and your make and model of your car. That way, like say, if we do plan to tow cars at some point, we know that we have your car on file and we will not tow it, right? So every Walmart is a little bit different, but I'd say 90% of them, maybe even 95, allow you to park there overnight, but I do suggest checking in advance. The next thing is they usually give you a section. Sometimes this is super obvious because you'll see a bunch of other RVs there. Other times they just say like, hey, go to the gardening section and park in the back of the gardening section. I do suggest doing this, and I suggest parking as close as you can to the other cars without being too infringing upon their like personal space, so to speak. And the reason why is this: I've personally never had any issue parking at a Walmart parking lot overnight. Not once, not even once had a minor issue, but you do want to be as safe as possible. And I feel like there is something of having like safety in numbers. That let's say if you're that one car parked all the way on the other side of the Walmart parking lot by yourself, I feel like for safety reasons, you're more likely to have maybe a negative incident. But let's say if you're parked with all these other cars around you, you're parked with a huge group, and I feel like there is something to say about safety in numbers. So let's say if something ever goes wrong, or God forbid, if you just need something, whatever the case is, at least you have a lot of other people right around you. Number 7, gas logistics. Of course, if you're driving, you need to get gas. And there's a couple pro tips I do have about gas in particular. 1, if you go online, you can just search gas calculator and it can calculate how much money you might be spending in gas. This might be good to know. Like, say if you're trying to plan a road trip, you're trying to budget and figure out exactly how much money you might have to spend. This is a really good tool just to figure out, okay, how much money am I potentially gonna spend in gas? The second thing is hypermiling. Now, I could do an entire other video about hypermiling. In case you didn't know, hypermiling is a bunch of techniques to get the most MPG or miles per gallon. The number one hypermiling tip I will give you though among all of them is cruise control. So if I'm driving, I always have cruise control on. I set it. I find it makes the road trip a million times better. Of course, you want to stay focused. You want to stay alert. You don't want to just set the cruise control on and kind of zone out more. So you do want to be aware of your surroundings, of course, like anything. But cruise control is a huge go-to for me, and it's better on gas. Now, when it comes to getting gas, here's kind of my main strategy that I use. Sometimes some gas stations can be very far apart. I mean, very far apart. And sometimes, especially in a very remote area, there will be a sign. Other times, there will not be signs. So, what I typically do is this. On my car, I can see, and this is common in a lot of cars now, on my car, it will say, here's how many miles you have left to drive until your tank is empty. Any single time I hit double digits, so let's say I'm at 100 miles of driving left and it goes to 99 or 95 or 90 or 85 or whatever. Any single time I hit double digits, I always say, okay, the next gas station I see, the next time I see a sign for a gas station or whatever, I'm gonna stop. Gas stations can sometimes be way further away than you think, and the last thing you're gonna do, of course, as we all know, is be driving. You're looking at your gas gauge, you're like, shoot, I have 40 miles left. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I think I should be good, but I might not be. And this was sometimes I've cut it closer than I'd like to imagine. Number 8, Huel. All my dedicated subscribers already know about this because I've done a bajillion videos about Huel. But in case you didn't know, Huel is essentially powdered food. I did one experiment where I lived on only Huel for an entire month. It's a phenomenal product. I have it all the time, especially when it comes to road trips. This is my go-to. So like I said, not only will I bring a body armor and a gallon of water, sometimes I might even have 2 gallons of water, but I'll also bring a blender bottle and the bag of Huel. That way, like say if I'm driving and I'm like, you know what, I really need some food, but I don't want to stop and get McDonald's, which one is getting super overpriced now. I can't believe how expensive McDonald's is, even compared to like a normal restaurant. And 2, of course, not the healthiest thing for you. And then 3, it takes time out to have to like pull over, go get McDonald's and come back on the road. I mean, it's not that long, but it is kind of nice when it comes to Huel that I have my blender cup, I put water in it, put 2 scoops of the powder, shake it up, drink it, and I just had a 400 calorie, extremely healthy meal right there. It is so convenient. I can't remember the last time I did a road trip and didn't have Huel on me because it's that awesome. I love Huel as just a super easy way to get a healthy meal. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It doesn't need to be microwaved or anything. It's just 2 scoops of powder and water. You drink it, you keep driving. Number 9, AAA. AAA is amazing. I love AAA. No affiliation, by the way, or anything like that. A membership to AAA is only about, let's say, $130 a year, so it's very inexpensive. And trust me, that $130 goes a long way. If you, let's say, break down, you can be towed miles away, and that's included in the membership, right? If, let's say, you don't have the membership, just one tow miles away is going to cost you way more than just $130. And AAA is the kind of thing that you have just in case. Hopefully you never have to use it, but it's there just in case. I just look at it like extra insurance when it comes to roadside assistance. If, let's say, you go to start your car and you have your car battery on all night and you need to jump. If, let's say, you get locked out and you need to get in your car. If, let's say, you have a flat tire and need to replace it. If, let's say, you just need to be towed somewhere. The list goes on and on. AAA is there just in case you need it, and I'm telling you, that $130 you will spend is well worth it. In addition, let's say if you're driving and you're not stopping at Walmarts, you're gonna be crashing at hotels. A lot of hotels, you can get a discount if you have AAA. There are so many advantages in general to having AAA. And if you're doing a big road trip, you're doing a big long distance trip and you're driving for a while, you just you need AAA. And last, but definitely not least, maybe the most important one on this video, so finishing off strong, and that is getting a checkup. What I mean is if you're doing a big road trip, I'm talking hours upon hours, always bring your car to, like, say, a dealership or a mechanic, whatever you do, and just say, hey, just so you know, I'm gonna be driving, I'm going from here, point A to point B, I'm going across the country, whatever. Can you just double check on my car? Just make sure things look good. The brakes, the wheels, the fluids, etc., etc. When it comes to doing a road trip, one of the best things you can do beforehand, in addition to, like, say, planning all this stuff like I've talked about in this video, is double checking on your car. Making sure that everything looks good, and even, like, say, if you have to bring it to a mechanic or the dealership or wherever you want to bring your car, even if you have to spend like $50 just for them to say, like, hey, yeah, I double checked everything, you're good. Don't worry, everything looks good, you're good. That $50 or however much you have to spend or gonna spend, well worth it just to make sure. Because last thing you want to do is, like, say, be on the road and your brakes start failing, or you realize, I don't know, something's wrong with the fluids in your car, or just in general, something isn't working right, and now you're in the middle of nowhere trying to figure all this out. Always get your car checked beforehand.